guys both work for some really innovative businesses. Mirza, start with you. Just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about bluTonic.
Sure. So my name is Mirza, and Adam Grossman over here is my business partner. We started the company about 9 years ago. And initially, when we started the business, we were servicing a lot of agencies. So agencies would sell packages to brands, and at the end of the day, they had certain KPIs that they couldn't meet, and they would outsource that to us. So we essentially would go to publishers and other content producers, and we would contract with them and execute some of these more complex media buys. Through that, we realized that there was a substantial amount of time that this inventory wasn't being monetized. Initially, they would have these big campaigns that would have flight dates of, let's say, from the 5th to the 20th, but we realized from the 21st to the 30th, they weren't generating any revenue. So we began to monetize that remnant inventory, and we created basically a supply side where we would buy all the inventory, and then we would resell it to demand partners and advertisers and allow them to tap into this inventory that was unsold. So that allowed us to build a much larger supply pool and a much larger demand pool. And that's essentially how the business got started. It was monetizing remnant inventory on performance basis. And now the business has evolved. We've acquired multiple companies. We have 4 different divisions, and we do a lot more than that. But it's still along the same lines of managing supply and helping advertisers reach that supply.
Great, thanks. And Kevin, introduce yourself and tell us about TheraGun.
So I'm Kevin Crowley. I'm the head of the accounting and finance department at TheraGun. And we are in the business of making people pain-free. That's really what we're trying to do. We want people to be able to stop using painkillers. We want them to be able to do holistic things to really live their best life. So the product, I mean, it's great for a professional athlete. They can use it to recover faster. They can use it to play better. We have NFL players who will use it before the game, during halftime, after the game. It's really a pretty constant use. But at this point, we're really trying to get to the consumer, just that broad consumer, right? And making sure that we can provide this service to anybody and everyone who wants to get rid of pain. We've been around for about 3 years. The first product that we came out with was really the first product that was ever like this. The previous company that had something similar, it was a product that was a few $1,000s. It was really only used for PTs and chiropractors and for professional athletes. And now we've made this product that you can go online and buy. You can go into Best Buy and buy it. And it's really, we're hoping that we can change the way that people see pain and how they live their lives.
Great. And I mentioned that you guys have customers already in 40 countries. What is the business model there? So you're like a product for consumers. Is the model to grow that?
Yeah, so it's mainly a product to consumer. We have distributors in over 40 countries that are selling to sports teams, directly to consumers, to PTs, to chiropractors, to really anybody that can get use out of the product. And that's what, in the past year, we've gone from being in, I think, 10 to 15 countries to now over 40. And it's just growing that network and really getting word out of how helpful this device can be.
Yeah, and Mirza, for you with bluTonic, you've grown and you've acquired even other businesses, but essentially what is the monetization or model of how you guys generate revenue there?
So we help, we create tools for web publishers. We have video players that we monetize their video content. We place display banners, search bars, essentially all the ads and probably some of them that you may not like, we place on websites and mobile apps. So through that, we now have over, 2,000-3,000 publishers that we work with on a regular basis. So it's a lot of management.
Yeah, speaking of management, what is your philosophy for how you want your finance to kind of operate and help the business?
Sure. So I want to start off by saying that we were always self-funded. So Adam and I never had outside investors, and the reason why I bring that up is that we never had advisors. We never learned how to structure a business properly where it could scale out. So when we started the business, it was very elementary in a way, right? How we were running the operations internally. and we weren't really ready for scale. So we were doing a lot of the work manually. We were, doing a lot of data entry. We had numerous, accounts payable clerks, and it was very error prone. And that didn't allow us to create financial models or forecasting or anything that actually matters for the business. It just allowed us to get to the next month. And our philosophy now is to automate as much of that as possible and allow our accounting staff, which a lot of them were overqualified for the work we were having them do, to actually do things that help us run the business and help us prepare for next quarter, next year, look at new M&A opportunities and so forth.
Yeah, great. And Kevin, interested in hearing your thoughts on kind of the role and philosophy of the finance team there.
Yeah, so when I came on to TheraGun a year and a half ago, it was, we were in a very manual stage. Everything we did was completely manual. We were using QuickBooks. We were, had email threads going back and forth for approval workflows. It wasn't something that we could actively continue to do, especially at the growth that we were expecting. And so when you're having vendors in 20 different countries, you're having all these different currencies, you have to collect different tax forms from everybody. It's not something that we could do with a 3-person team. And so now what we've really tried to do is automate all of these processes as much as possible. It's worked, thankfully. We still have a 3-person team. We're able to make sure that we have everyone doing what they need to do as opposed to just manually entering data. I think automation in accounting and finance is one of the most important things that we can really do in a company now, because you can allow those employees to actually start to analyze what they're doing and not just entering information, and they can actually see what they're doing and help the business. And us being able to do that has really helped with just what we can do with forecasting and making sure that we can really make the business grow.
Yeah, and you mentioned you saw kind of the headwinds of a challenge ahead with AP, and then you were on QuickBooks, but then you kind of even moved up from that. What was happening? Describe kind of the situation, the challenges that were happening.
Yeah, so I mean, everyone has, I guess, issues when they're in those beginning stages of a startup, right? It's something that you kind of have to manage and deal with, and we just saw with the growth that was coming, it wasn't going to be possible. We were having invoices go missing. We were having people send invoices into our AP team that no one knew what it was for, and they're just pay it, and then it gets paid, and no one knows what it's for. So it's something that you can't really keep a handle on, and we knew that we needed to find something to really fix that problem.
Mirza, as you guys were growing then, you had publishers and advertisers, and what scope did you hit where you were thinking, gosh, we need to invest in a technology?
Well, around the time that people started saying they were going to quit if we didn't change something. So, yeah, I mean, for us, the big issue was that we just have so much volume of invoices, and each month we're processing hundreds of payments. And it was just hard to keep track of them. We have multiple divisions, and it really wasn't, the communication internally also wasn't as efficient as it should have been. So what Tipalti allowed us to do was to have certain roles within the business where I don't necessarily want to give all of my employees access to our books, but I want to allow them to see who's been paid and who hasn't, and what payments are upcoming. So it allowed us to give different roles within Tipalti to certain employees, and it allows us to make better decisions on that front and operate the business more efficiently. On the accounting side, it allowed us to streamline everything. We now have a monthly reconciliation process where we reconcile all of our billable numbers from all of our different servers. We then take that data, upload it directly into Tipalti and into our books, and everything gets reconciled immediately. Prior to that, we were entering everything manually. So, I mean, think about entering 400 or 500 invoices a month manually into a banking system. And we also work with a lot of companies that are international, so we'd get a call from our bank saying, yeah, we're rejecting this wire because you haven't done enough business with this company in this country. We're like, wait a second, we need to pay this person today. So it kind of streamlined all of that and allowed everything to be under one hub, where we now have full control over the finances, and we're not always scrambling to enter data or just, we've also had a lot of errors where we've paid the wrong company or paid the wrong amount, and that not allowing people to touch that data now by just exporting and importing the source data allows us to eliminate a lot of those errors.
Got it, yeah. Kevin, was there a certain thing you were needing to upgrade when you guys started to look at solutions? Like, how did you land on Tipalti, and kind of what was the need that you had other than just automate stuff?
So a big part of what we wanted to do along with the automation was making sure that all of our payments were coming from one place. It's tough when you have multiple bank accounts that are paying different people. You have TransferWise accounts across the world, right, where you're trying to send all these payments out. And so we really wanted to bring everything into one place to where we could manage it a lot better. We could see it all in one area. And also for the tax compliance, that was one of the really big factors that led to us using Tipalti, is we didn't really see anybody else in this space that was offering that. And so to automate the entire onboarding process for a vendor, to have them enter all of their own information, and basically all you're doing is providing an email. And then they go and make sure everything's accurate. It completely takes the burden off of you making sure all of the bank accounts are entered correctly. All of the tax compliance forms have been collected. I think that was probably the biggest thing that led to us taking Tipalti over the competitors.
And Mirza, for you, tell us about he touched on vendor, supplier. You're paying really partners too. You're kind of in a world of partner payments. He's in a world of paying invoices. Describe the importance of that relationship with your partners and this whole payables operation as well.
Yeah, so we rely on our partners to operate our business, and a lot of that's based on trust. And I'm sure, as in many other industries, our industry has a lot of issues with payments and people not paying on time or not paying in general. So it's very easy to lose that trust between partners. And what Tipalti has allowed us to do, as he mentioned, by allowing the vendors to enter that payment data, it kind of removes the liability away from us from saying, hey, we entered the wrong data, or this wire got rejected, or this payment didn't go through. They have a portal now where they can log in. They see that we attempted to make the payment. It got rejected for whatever reason. A lot of times it's the vendor's issue, or it's they didn't upload all their tax documents. So it allows us to not have to essentially be responsible for payments or any of their payment information. It's also a security issue. We're not housing any of their tax documents. We're not holding any of their financial data. Everything is within Tipalti. All we have to do is just make sure they get signed up and enter all of the data, and everything else is automated.
Kevin, for you, complexities of dealing with invoices. If you could just describe now today kind of a typical example of, you get a new vendor, they might even be in another country, and how that flows for you to get them paid.
Yeah, so normally, all vendors still come in the same way initially, right? It's through whoever the relationship manager is within TheraGun. And so we basically get them set up with our AP team. Our AP team adds their email into Tipalti, and they get an onboarding notification email. Once they get this onboarding notification email, they click a link, they fill out all their information, they upload their tax documents, and then they have two options. They can either send email of the invoice to our invoicing email alias, or they can upload it directly into the system. Either way works for us. We don't have to touch it. It gets into the system. We approve it on the AP side, making sure just everything's entered correctly. And then it goes into the approval workflow within Tipalti for the account manager. The account manager can approve it, dispute it. They can send it back to AP for any reason. And assuming that they approve it, we just then push it through to payments, and it's that simple.
Wow. Yeah, and Mirza, for you, again, dealing with a lot of payments, but they're not with an invoice. Describe how you're paying all your partners, and it's a pretty vast amount of partners that you're paying. Describe just kind of the simplification that's occurred.
And we have more of a mass pay model, so we issue all payments once a month, or at most twice a month. So at the end of each month, we reconcile all of our server numbers, and we gather all of the financial data. And through that data, we then compile it internally and import it into Tipalti. And we essentially create a credit memo for the vendors. So we're in charge of what they're getting paid and how much. So once we upload that, it syncs up with our books. And in terms of accounting, it's basically done. But from there, we then have a few different steps where for each division, the head of that division will review all of the amounts and ensure that there aren't any amounts that are being disputed, or that basically there aren't any issues with those payments. And from there, once they approve it, then it goes to management, and then we give the final approval.
Okay. Kevin, so now that you've got, you've had Tipalti for about 8 months now, what are some of the benefits that you're seeing compared to then how things were happening before? What's it allowed you guys to do?
Yeah. Well, if we didn't switch to Tipalti, we would have had to hire at least one more head. I think that's the main thing that we've seen, is that we've been able to use one person to kind of manage our accounts payable and accounts receivable, because as opposed to previously where she was spending 70 to 80% of her time on AP, it's now the other way, where she can spend about 20% of her time on AP and 80% of the time on billing. And as the company grows, you want your people to focus on collecting money a lot more than paying money. And so I think that's the real benefit that we've seen, is just that time savings. But also, I mean, we have had no instances of fraud since we put Tipalti in place. We've had no instances of anyone getting paid the wrong amount, or any vendors putting in the wrong bank information. You know, there hasn't really been any issues with payments since we switched over to Tipalti.
Great. And Mirza, for you, what are some of these, the benefits that go with payables automation now for bluTonic?
Well, initially it's the amount of time that we've saved, and it's allowing us as management to have access to this financial data a lot quicker, and it's all in one portal. So prior to this, we had vendors, some would require ACH payments, some would require wires, some would require PayPal. So in order for us to track down a payment, if we weren't following the books, we would have to log in all of these different systems and try to figure out where we were paying them. Or they would change their preferences. That's another really big one. They would change their payment preferences from wire to ACH. And that was all information we had to enter manually previously. So now it's all in one hub. Everybody has access to it that needs to have access to it. And it allows us to keep everything centralized and have access to that data. And the big part for us is also fraud. We've had that happen as well. And yeah, I mean, it's really just streamlined our entire payment process.
Oh, great. And to kind of close it out, for any folks out there that might be in a similar business where they have partners in a mass pay kind of workflow, any advice for them on going through a transformation project like this, looking back?
Well, I think it depends on the business model and what they're specifically looking for. I would highly suggest that they look into Tipalti. For us, it was the best platform that we could find on the market at the time. And I would just suggest that they really not only think about what problems are they having today, but what problems do you anticipate having as you grow, 2-3x from now and 5 years from now? Because a lot of times the implementation process is very time consuming. So I would highly suggest that everybody looks at next 5, 10, 15 years and how this software could help you and be there for you when you scale out.
Great. Kevin, slightly different question for you. Now that you've had this successful project and you've transformed your company's payables, is there anything next? What has it allowed you the freedom to kind of now do as a finance leader?
Yeah, I mean, being able to, I guess, reduce your AP cycle by 70% really opens up your whole team, right? And so obviously it's allowed me to get into more of a strategic position. We're not just constantly trying to get people paid. We're actually trying to help the business grow. We're working on operational needs. We're organizational needs, really everything. And I think that that's something you can't really do when you're just constantly worried about getting money out to people. It's really alleviated a lot of the stresses that come along with your accounts payable. And it's allowed the whole team to really grow and start working in some other projects that wouldn't have been possible before.
Great. Well, thank you guys.